All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the formerly Mile High County College Football Podcast. We are changing our name because that was a name we just kind of like adopted because we were both App State students. Well, I still am. Jacob isn't. But both not living in Boone anymore or anything. So we're going to change our name up. We are now the No Name College Football Podcast. So everybody, welcome into the first episode of the No Name College Football Podcast. We had a lot of plans for off-season content that we never just really got around to doing. So here we are, first episode of the year, and we're ready. Get back into it. Just run over real quick, what we got going today. We're gonna run into our going into the year top 25. Run over some Heisman stuff. Talk about some top group of 5 teams, and then look at the Power 5 conferences a little slightly in depth, and project who we got in the conference championship games, winning them, and then talk about the playoffs. I'm Cam. So my co-host Jacob.
This way, Jacob. I'm up high on my screen, but either way.
Whatever it comes out in, who cares? So yeah. Jacob, if you want to start off, since I've been the one talking so far with your top 25, you can go ahead.
So you just want to go, we'll start with just the bottom 5, 21 through 25. So at 25, I have Ole Miss. 24, I have North Carolina. 23, I have South Carolina. Those two actually play week 1. And then 22, I have UCLA. And 21, I have Wisconsin. I can go into depth about a couple of these teams, but I'll just stick with I'll go with Wisconsin here. Wisconsin just hired a new coach from Cincinnati, Luke Fickell. He's got playoff experience. He's going to bring a new style of offense into Wisconsin. They're used to more of a ground and pound. They bring in Tanner Mordecai from SMU to play quarterback. I think you're going to see a Wisconsin offense that maybe not air raid, but they'll throw the ball a little more than they're used to. And I think Wisconsin's going to have a good year. They're in a weak division, and they've got a lot of talent. So I like Wisconsin at 21.
Yeah, I agree. Team that was right outside my top 25. Couldn't do it yet after they went, if I'm correct, like 7-5 last year?
It was either 6 and I think it was actually 6-6.
Yeah, so 7-6, they won their bowl game. So I mean, I left them out just because I kind of factored in last year along with going into this year. Again, mine start off. I also have Ole Miss at 25. Last minute addition. If you could see my paper, it's literally I had Ole Miss, crossed them out, put Wisconsin, crossed them out again, and then put Ole Miss again. So they're at 25. At 24, I have Iowa. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Just kidding. I do have Wisconsin at 25. Ole Miss at 24. Iowa at 23. I have UTSA at 22. And at 21, I have Texas Tech. So,
okay.
Not a lot.
We have very similar thoughts on Texas Tech.
Yeah, not a lot of stuff I can really go into depth about those teams. UTSA's, been one of the top group of 5 teams past couple of years. We'll get into that maybe a bit later. Iowa is going to have a good defense, at least, that much. But yeah, love what you said about Wisconsin. I think they're going to have a big year. I think they're in for a big year. Over there in the Big Ten, don't really know East, maybe. I don't know what they call it.
Wisconsin's in the West.
West, yeah. So
them and Iowa.
Yep.
But moving on, so you have Texas Tech at 21. I have Texas Tech at 20. And then I have Kansas State 19, Oregon State 18, Tulane 17, and TCU 16. I want to talk about Oregon State. I know that as a Clemson fan, you probably hate DJ Uiagalelei, but no matter what you think about DJ Uiagalelei, he is an upgraded quarterback from what they had last year, and that's going on to a team that won 10 games.
Yeah.
And the Pac-12 is a really deep conference this year, and Oregon State's a part of that. They're, I believe, 5th in odds, but they're definitely a team to watch. Then another team I want to talk about, TCU. They played for the national title last year, but they lost a lot off that team, and there's a lot's being made about what TCU is going to do this year. So I kind of slotted them at 16 as kind of a safe spot. But I am high on their quarterback. I'm high on their coaching staff, and the Big 12 every year is wide open.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I got three Big 12 teams right here in my 16 through 20, with Kansas State, Texas Tech, and TCU.
Yeah.
So I think those are all similar teams in terms of talent and going into the year. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. So getting started at 20, I have North Carolina,
Okay.
19 Tulane, which is my highest ranking group of five team. 18, I have Kansas State. 17, I have Texas, and 16, I have Oregon. Team I want to talk about there is North Carolina. I think that they have the potential to really shoot up this year and, get into the top 10 by the end of the year. It just is really dependent on what you get out of Drake May and what you get out of that defense. That defense was it had the talent last year, but it was very, very like volatile. Like they gave up a lot of points, even though they shouldn't have been, in my opinion. They lost their two best corners, and they lost a couple other guys, but their front seven is definitely going to perform. Their front seven has a ton of talent. Their offense is going to score points, but I mean, UNC I think is a real wild card this year, and I think there's a decent shot that they could pop up. Now I said this a few years back when they had Sam Howell going into Sam Howell's last year, and I was completely wrong. So I will see what happens with UNC, but I think they're definitely a team to watch out for this year.
My only thing with UNC's defense is they kept their defensive coordinator,
Yep.
and I don't know why.
Yeah.
But I'll say one thing about your list. You said Oregon 16, Texas 17.
Yep.
You're not gonna like where I have them then.
Uh,
But so this is where you're gonna hate me. I have Clemson at 15, Utah at 14, Notre Dame at 13, Tennessee at 12, and Washington at 11. And for me, with some of these five, I just have a lot of questions that I don't have with some of the teams ranked above them. Like, for example, Clemson, Cade Klubnik has a lot of talent, and I do think he's an upgrade at quarterback, but he also currently has more interceptions than touchdowns. So it's hard to project, especially in a ranking where I'm not projecting it. So it's hard to know exactly what Cade's going to be. I am high on Garrett Riley as the offensive coordinator. I'm high on Will Shipley, and Clemson will probably be favored in every single one of their games. So we'll see. They'll probably finish higher than 15, but that's just where I have them. I'm high on Sam Hartman at Notre Dame. Notre Dame's never had an explosive quarterback, honestly. So them getting Sam Hartman could really pay off for them. Tennessee, you already know what the deal is with Tennessee. And then Washington with Michael Penix Jr. They have a good defense as well. Washington's a real contender for the Pac-12 this year. I
yep.
mean, they've got great receivers, great quarterback play. Their defense isn't bad. It's just, can they sustain success with expectations? Last year, they didn't have any expectations, so it was easier for them to exceed those. Now they're ranked in the top 15. Can they maintain that level of success?
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see that with Washington.
For sure. 15, I have Oregon State right above Oregon. I felt like it was right to kind of group them together in this 15, 16 kind of slot felt where that should be at. 14, I have Notre Dame, 13, Washington, 12, Utah, and 11, Clemson. I guess, we can see up here, big
Yeah.
Clemson guy. I mean, honestly, I am where you are. I think a lot of Clemson's record is going to depend on how Cade Klubnik plays. The defense is going to somewhat perform at the very least, but you look at Cade and his weapons, you don't know what you're going to get from that offensive line. They're really just so up and down every year. You Will Shipley, if stays healthy, I think is a top 10 running back.
First.
Yeah. And then, I mean, you got Antonio Williams at receiver, who had a great breakout year last year, young guy. And there's a couple more names in that receiver room that I think have potential to really break out this year and have a good year. But Utah, talking about them real quick, Dalton Rising,
Cameron Rising.
huh? Cam-
Cameron.
Cameron. I was thinking Dalton, baseball player, my fault.
PK. Yeah.
Um, yeah, if you really look at them, if the performance is there from him on the field, they're going to be a really good team, and they're going to obviously be in contention to win the Big or Pac-12. Sorry, Oregon State. I'm not gonna get into them. Notre Dame, I think, has potential to really do something this year. Also, with Sam Hartman being there, there's a lot of expectations. They do play a few good teams, and I mean, if you see them take a few good teams down, they might be back in the playoffs again. And then Washington, man, I'm excited. Like you said, I'm excited.
I'm excited.
I'm excited for that one. I want to see what MPJ can do. Uh, and Washington's always been kind of a good football team at the very least, even if not super relevant.
Yeah. So I guess now that we're in the top 10, we can just go team by team.
Yeah.
So who do you have at 10?
I do have Tennessee. I felt like Tennessee and Clemson were another like group where it was like you kind of got to put them together. Played in the bowl game last year. It was closer than what the score indicated, but Tennessee did kind of dominate the game. But Tennessee lost players, Clemson lost players, and I felt like it was right. I felt like they were very even teams last year, so I felt like it was okay to group them together this year. Joe Milton, great arm, not too big on it myself, but
I'm not either.
see what happens in that Josh Heupel offense. You know they're going to put up points, but got to see what else happens there.
Yeah, I feel like with Joe Milton, you're either real hot on him or real cold, and I'm in the latter. He's lost his starting job twice, but he's got all the talent in the world.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
at 10, now this might be low, but I've got Southern Cal at 10. I just, with their defense, probably not going to improve. They led the country in turnover margin last year. I don't know how repeatable that is. And I just think there's other teams out there that could make more noise than they could. And they have Caleb Williams, but I could definitely see them losing a game or two. I think that defense is just going to come bite them this year. And I just couldn't put them ahead of some of these other teams that I have ranked ahead of them.
Yeah, for sure.
But they're a very good team.
Yeah.
Um,
At 9, I have Florida State. Uh, this was one of those teams where it did not feel right to put them this high, in my opinion. I'm not sure what we're really going to get out of them. And man, that could be a huge. I think FSU is in contention for biggest disappointment this year for sure, in college football. So I think I kind of felt like this, 8 through 11. So Clemson, Tennessee, FSU, and then who I'm going to say here at 8 in a few minutes are in that contention for biggest disappointment in college football this year for sure.
I also have Florida State at 9. I agree with you because they've been perennially bad, and now they have expectations. And you mix that with the fact that other than LSU, they didn't beat anybody good last year.
Yeah.
But they return everybody.
Uh-huh.
Like they return like 90% of their production, and they added some guys in the transfer portal.
Yep.
I'm a Florida State believer to a certain extent. I'm not going to say that yet, but I think they're going to be a top 10 team this year.
Yeah,
But we'll see. They definitely have high bus potential for sure.
for sure. And then at 8, team I was just talking about is TCU. Probably a little high. I'm not that big on them this year just because they lost a lot of pieces. Like you said earlier, like the coach, like the quarterback they have now, but it's just I don't see them doing anything. I'm not gonna say anything close to what they did last year, but I definitely think they're more in that 8, 7 to 10 range, maybe of wins, 10 being everything goes really good for them, in my opinion. So I do have them at 8 because, like I said earlier, I kind of base this off of where everybody stood at the end of last year. plus going into this year, so I feel like 8 was a good spot for TCU. I couldn't put them any lower to
Yeah.
acknowledge what they did last year, at least.
Somebody tried to make a bet with me yesterday that TCU wouldn't make a bowl game this year, and I was like, "Come on, I'll take that bet."
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
at number 8, I have Texas, and I know that it's Texas and it's every year, but I think this year's different. They have Quinn Ewers, who's one of the top quarterbacks in the country. They have a top 3 receiver room in the country, Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell. They lose Bijan Robinson, which is going to hurt, but I think that they can make up with that with some of the passing game. Not to mention they've got a ton of talent on that defense. I think Texas is legitimate, and I think 8's a good spot
yeah,
preseason.
for sure.
It's hot, but
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll get into it later, but I don't disagree with anything you said, honestly. At 7, I have Southern Cal.
it's fair.
I am higher on them than I feel like most people are, which we'll get into that later a little bit. But bringing in Dorian Singer, who was the leading Pac-12 receiver, if I'm correct, last year at Arizona. Still have Mario Williams, who had a good year last year, and Brendan Rice kind of popping off there towards the end of the season. I feel like the wide receiver room is a little slept on, in my opinion. The running back room is also pretty decent, in my opinion. And then you've got the best quarterback in the nation by, in my opinion, kind of a landslide. So, I mean, if the defense can perform, they're gonna put up points. There's no doubt about that. If their defense can perform to a decent extent, I think they've got a legitimate shot at winning the national championship this year.
See, I agree with everything you said, but the reason I have them 10 is because everything you said was on offense.
Yep,
Their defense just scares me, but their offense is
I agree.
probably the best in the country this year.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, number 7, I'm staying in the Pac-12. I've got Oregon at 7.
Hmm.
And this kind of aligns with where I'm going to go later. But I think Oregon's got a lot of talent. They play a balanced brand of football. I'm really high on Bo Nix as a college quarterback. Year 2 under Dan Lanning, I think Dan Lanning's a really good coach, and year 2 coaches usually perform well. And there's a lot of just little stats I won't get into that I'm just high on Oregon. I like their defense. I just like their team a lot this year.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of talent. I think they are a sleeper playoff team, in my opinion. At 6, I have Penn State.
Okay.
I know a lot of expectations are riding high there, but it wouldn't not be the James Franklin thing to do to go 8-4.
No, yeah.
So expectations are high on them, but we'll get into it in a little bit. I'm not super high on them, but I think 6 is a reasonable ranking for them.
So I have Alabama at 6. And it comes down to the fact that their offense was streaky last year, and the receivers weren't great last year. They led the SEC in drop passes. Well, now you lose a Heisman Trophy quarterback in Bryce Young, and you bring in 3 guys who 2 of them you've seen play. Jalen Milroe against A&M did not look great. Tyler Buckner lost to Marshall, and Ty Simpson hasn't played a collegiate down that's meaningful. And you watch these guys in the spring game, and they don't look that good. So I worry about Alabama's downfield passing game this year. Now, Jace McClellan and Justice Haynes at running back, fully believe that. And I think Alabama's going to go back to that ground and pound this year. Their defense is going to be really, really good. I couldn't go higher than 6 just based on quarterback play and based on offense. I just couldn't go higher than 6.
Yeah, for sure. At 5, I have LSU. Also a reasonable ranking in my opinion. Jaden Daniels is gonna ball out this year. I mean, there's no doubt about that, in my opinion. Their defense is going to be at least somewhat decent. They've got the talent. I think their offense is going to also be at least somewhat decent. The problem is that they play in the SEC, and you never know what you're going to get in the SEC, in my opinion. It honestly, LSU, if they were in my opinion, if they were in the Big Ten, or if they are in the Big 12, they're in the Pac-12, they're in the ACC, they'd win any other conference. But because they're in the SEC, it's hard for me to pick them to win that conference. Right now,
get
5, but I don't be surprised. Let me look at their schedule again real quick, but don't be surprised if LSU, yeah, don't be surprised if LSU doesn't end up like Tennessee last year and be the number 1 seed once college football playoff rankings come out.
It's very possible with their schedule and what they've got up to that point. At 5, I've got Penn State, and you've already talked about them some, but I think that the biggest swing player in college football this year is Drew Aller, former 5-star quarterback. He's going to start this year for Penn State. If he performs the level that he's capable of performing, Penn State could win. I mean, name it, they could win it.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got great running backs, great defense, great lines of scrimmage at Penn State, great home field advantage. I mean, everything is there for Penn State. It just all depends on Drew Aller and how he can perform at quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. If I'm correct, well, oh, I'm sorry. You just said something about them having great home field advantage. I didn't write it down, but I mean, they do play Michigan at home. I know that, but I think Ohio State is on the road. So their two biggest games that matter the most, in my opinion, are flipped. At 4, I have Alabama. You kind of talked about them. Quarterback situation is a question mark for me. I'm big on, oh man, what's his name? I mean, they went and got what's his name from Jermaine Burton, but Kobe Prentice, that's what I'm thinking of. Kobe Prentice, I'm big on him at wide receiver. So I think they've got the potential to perform. You know, their defense is going to be good. You know, their offensive line is going to protect whatever quarterback is there, you know, week in and week out. But they're going to run the ball, and I hate to say this sentence, but they have the greatest college football coach of all time. So
yeah, and they have the most talented roster in college football. Recruiting.
I wouldn't doubt anything that they can do, honestly.
Well, no, you never can. It's Alabama.
Yeah.
At number 4, I have LSU, and I agree with everything you said about LSU. They're very underrated at wide receiver. They have a Texas, Ohio State, Southern Cal level receiving core, and they probably have the best defensive player in college football in Harold Perkins. And they bring back Mason Smith, who could be the best defensive lineman in college football this year. The only questions about LSU, and it sounds weird to say this about the LSU team. Well, there's 2: rushing offense from the running back position and the secondary.
Yeah.
I think those are just marginal questions. Like when you're going against the big boys, I think LSU is legitimate. Year 2 under Brian Kelly. I'm really high on LSU this year.
Yeah. At 3, I do have Michigan. I mean, you know, bringing back Blake Corum, bringing back JJ McCarthy. There's not a lot to say about Michigan. Their defense is going to be good. Their offensive line is more than likely going to be good. Just depends on how the weapons on the offense perform, in my opinion. JJ McCarthy has another good year, and Blake Corum has the years that he's been having the past 2 years or so. I mean, the sky's the limit for him, in my opinion.
So I have Ohio State 3, and it just comes down to the fact that they lost CJ Stroud and Michigan didn't lose much.
Yeah.
I think they're very similar teams. I'm interested to see what Ohio State does on defense this year. Year 2 under Jim Knowles, a defensive coordinator. That's the thing about Ohio State. They're soft. They've got to not be soft. Everybody says it, but they got a lot of talent. It doesn't matter who steps in a quarterback for me. Ohio State's going to have a good quarterback. So that doesn't worry me at all.
Yeah. At 2, I have Ohio State. Um, but I mean, their running back room is crazy.
It is
Receiver room is, I mean,
better.
the best one we might have seen in the past 10 years or so when it's all said and done. Their offensive line, is going to play pretty good.
Yeah,
And I think talent, like position for position wise, talent wise, I think they might actually have the best defense in college football, especially the front seven. If their front seven steps up and plays hard, and their quarterback they at least have decent, performance from their quarterback position. I think it's definitely a real shot that they win the national championship for sure. And
I
that's
think it's a real shot.
that's why I have them at number two.
At two, I have Michigan, and again, it's just they bring everybody back. They beat Ohio State last year. They they have a great running game, great offensive line. You just worry about receiver and outside talent with Michigan because they've got the defense, they've got all of these things. It's just when you get to play the big boys, can Michigan spread the field enough to beat a Georgia?
Yeah,
Or, and I know it's weird to say this because they beat Ohio State, but if Ohio State plays like they do against Georgia, against Michigan, it could have been a different result.
oh yeah, for sure.
So I don't know. I'm Michigan, Ohio State was really tough for me. I think that they're very similar levels.
Yeah,
Uh, but I guess number one, we both have Georgia.
yeah. I mean, you can talk about them. Not much to say.
Well, I mean, going into the year, like hypothetically, Georgia will have a top three defense at worst. They will probably have the best defense in the country. Georgia's got the best receiver room Georgia's ever had. It's not LSU, it's not Southern Cal, and it's not Ohio State, but it's a solid receiver room. You get Lad McConkey, you get some transfers in there. We still have Brock Bowers. I don't think Georgia's unbeatable. We don't have the level of dynamic pass catching running back we've had the last couple of years. But I mean, other than that, and Carson Beck, the quarterback, it's going to be on him. Is he as good as Stetson Bennett? Does he have to be as good as Stetson Bennett?
Yeah,
So it's not that there's not questions about Georgia. I just think that there's no question that Georgia's got to be number one going into the year.
yeah, for sure. I don't think there's. I don't. In my opinion, I can listen to arguments from anybody all I want. I don't think there's a right answer. I mean, a wrong answer that Georgia's not number one. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't understand how anybody could not rank Georgia number one going into the year. I know the quarterback is a question. I know y'all lost a decent chunk of guys, but I don't think there's anywhere that Kirby Smart doesn't know how to fill in a hole. You know what I mean? So I mean, Georgia number one, and that's the top 25. So we're running to Heisman stuff real quick if you want to.
Yes.
You can go first if you want to. I have a top five. I have a dark horse that's like, probably a top 10 to 12 guy. And then I have
Yeah.
like a absolute dark horse that's like he's not even really being talked about, but I want to put his name out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So my top five in Heisman is is Caleb Williams, Michael Penix Jr., Drake May, Bo Nix, and Quinn Ewers would be my top five for the Heisman.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're all quarterbacks. I mean, if you're doing a top five, they got to all be quarterbacks.
Uh,
Um,
yeah.
and then a dark horse for me would be Nick Singleton, running back out of Penn State. And then if you're saying absolute dark horse, man, I didn't even think about the guy that nobody's talking about. I don't even know. I mean, Spencer Rattler of South Carolina goes off, maybe.
I feel like people are at least talking about Spencer Rattler though. Like you'll see mine in a minute. Like my guy, like if you
Okay.
if you put it down as a bet, the bet's probably like plus 50,000 odds.
Okay. But I have Bo Nix
Yeah.
winning the Heisman Trophy this year.
I mean, he's definitely my top 10, but he's not my top five.
Okay.
At 5, I try to project this off of how these teams going to. So that's where I'm at on this. At 5, I have Taylor Buckner, who's more than likely going to probably be the quarterback in Alabama, in my opinion. So he's the quarterback at Alabama.
Yeah.
They play really good. He's going to be at least in consideration. I mean, Mac Jones was. Well, he had a good, but I'm not going to get into that. At 4, I have Michael Penix Jr. I think he's going to have a great year. I think Washington's going to have a great year, and I think he's very, very talented. At 3, I have my second favorite quarterback in all of college football, talent wise, Jaden Daniels. I think he's going to have a great year. He really turned it on there towards the end of the year last year with LSU. At 2, it's funny enough, you said you got to have quarterbacks. I actually don't have a quarterback at number 2. I have Blake Corum at number 2.
Okay.
I think he's going to end up having one, if stays healthy, one of the best years we've seen from a college running back in a good little while this year at Michigan. And at number 1, it's got to be Caleb Williams. I mean, how is it not? The receiving room's great. Running backs are great. I wouldn't be surprised if he throws for 45. I think he threw for 4,500 yards last year, so I wouldn't be surprised if he does it again.
Yeah, I would.
My dark horse is Carson Beck, because of being at Georgia. I mean, again, that's a team that if it's the same thing with Taylor Buckner, it's like, or Tyler. Is it Taylor or Tyler?
It's Tyler Buckner.
My bad.
Awesome.
If Georgia goes 12-0 and is the number 1 team in the country all year, how is your quarterback not in contention? And then my absolute dark horse is Talon Green, the quarterback out of Boise State. I really, really, really like him as a player. I think he is very talented, very athletic. He has a huge arm, and he runs like Jalen Hurts. So he's 6'6". He was a freshman last year, and he had a decent year. I'm not going to say he had a good year, but he had a decent year at Boise State last year as a freshman. So I am interested to see what he can do. And if he goes off, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up transferring to a big school next year. If he does, I would almost say he's a lock to be the number 1 pick in the draft the next year.
Okay. How do you feel about this? I've got 3 players that aren't quarterbacks that actually have a shot. I know I said Nick Singleton, but I think the only 3 players in the country that have a shot that aren't quarterback to win the Heisman is Blake Corum, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Brock Bowers.
Yeah. I think it's possible.
And that's why I don't think that Carson Beck is going to win the Heisman, because I think if we're undefeated and Brock Bowers is going off, that they would invite Bowers.
Yeah. I agree. Just non-college football thing real quick. Sorry, my phone was blowing up. The Mets just traded Justin Verlander to the Astros. Anyway,
Okay. That's big time. That's big time.
Let's talk about the group of 5 real quick. First off, I have one question for you. Do you consider Notre Dame group of 5? Because I personally don't.
Notre Dame is not group of 5, no.
I don't consider them a group of 5, but I just had to make sure before I went through my rankings. I'm just gonna run through this real quick. I've got 2 honorable mentions real quick. Those being Western Kentucky from Conference USA and Toledo from the MAC.
I hate you.
I'm sorry.
I had Western Kentucky as my dark horse too.
Really? Well, they're my dark horse, but neither conference had a team make my top 10. So I just wanted to say those real quick. I think those are the best conferences. At 10, I have James Madison out of the Sun Belt. At 9, I have Marshall out of the Sun Belt. At 8, I have Air Force out of the Mountain West. At 7, I have San Diego State out of the Mountain West. At 6, I have SMU out of the American. 5, I have South Alabama, who's sleeper, even though they're top 5 to be the best team in group of 5 this year. They've returned almost everybody from their 10-win team last year. Troy at 4, Boise State at 3, UTSA at 2, and Tulane at 1. Those 2 teams you heard earlier have my top 25. So yeah.
So I did a top 5, and then I had an honorable mention as Western Kentucky. But at 5, I had South Alabama. 4, I had Boise State. 3, Troy. 2, UTSA, and 1, I had Tulane. and Tulane was the only team that I had ranked in my top 25. But I will say UTSA plays Tennessee this year, and if Tennessee's defense hasn't improved, that could be an interesting game.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Um, so what we can move over to conference predictions if you want to. When you start in the ACC, thank you for earlier pointing out to me that the ACC does not do divisions anymore. So that changes a little bit of things up for me, but not too much. So if you want to start out here, you can, or I can.
So we could start ACC. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a sleeper team, a disappointing team, and then conference championship game and conference champion. So in the ACC, my sleeper team is Duke. Duke won 9 games last year. Riley Leonard's a really good quarterback. It's year 2 under Mike Elko.
Yeah.
I think Duke's going to have a good year. I think they're a little bit under the radar, and I think they're going to have a good year. My disappointment, and this is not that they won't make a bowl game or only win 6 games. I just think based on expectations, I just don't think North Carolina's defense is good enough.
Yeah.
I could see North Carolina slip into 4th or 5th, maybe 6th in the ACC this year.
Okay.
But with that being said, I have the standard prediction for the ACC championship this year. I have Florida State versus Clemson, and I have Florida State winning. I have Clemson winning in the regular season, and then I have Florida State winning in the conference title.
Okay. Sleeper team. You know, I think Duke's gonna have a down year. I do like Riley Leonard as a quarterback. I think he's very talented, but I don't know how the rest of that team shapes up. Also sorry if it's loud or y'all can hear that my dad's cutting the grass. So, sleeper team in the ACC. Give me Virginia Tech. Don't really have a reasoning behind it, but give me Virginia Tech.
Okay.
I think their schedule plays nice for them too. And disappointing team. Is Syracuse eligible for disappointing team because they had a good year last year?
That's fine.
Because I have them going 4-8 this year. So, I mean, yeah. So ACC championship. I also have Clemson, FSU, but no bias, like for real, no bias here. I do have Clemson sweeping the series against FSU this year
Okay.
in the regular season and the ACC championship, and Clemson would also, in that terms, win the ACC regular season and the ACC championship. So I have Clemson losing 2 games this year.
Okay. So we can move to, I want to know your Big 12. I want to know I can go first. My sleeper in the Big 12, I've got a feeling we have the same sleeper. I have Kansas as my sleeper. Jalen Daniels, really good quarterback. When he was healthy last year, Kansas was a good team. If he stays healthy, I could see Kansas winning 7-8 games plus, which is a lot for Kansas. My disappointment, and it's not going to be a huge disappointment, but Kansas State to me doesn't recruit at a level to where they can replace a guy like Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah.
And I think Deuce Vaughn meant so much to that team last year. I could see Kansas State this year taking a step back. But for my Big 12 championship game, I have Texas versus Texas Tech, and I have Texas winning the Big 12.
Okay. I do have Texas winning the Big 12 also. But I have them beat TCU in the championship.
Okay.
The way the schedule plays out, I just think TCU's gonna have a decent year. Sleeper team, even though I had them going 6-6, give me UCF. I like John Reese Plumlee a lot. Actually, no. Would Cincinnati, in your opinion, right? In your opinion, would you consider Cincinnati a sleeper team in that division?
They lost Luke Fickell, so yeah, and they replaced him with Scott Satterfield.
Give me Cincinnati then.
Okay.
I think waves, not huge waves. I do have them winning 8 games though, which I feel like is higher than most people. But I think they make waves their first year in the Big 12. And disappointing team, give me Oklahoma.
Okay.
Oklahoma, I think, is going to be my disappointing team. I mean, I haven't gone 7-5, which in reality is made a bold, but them or Baylor,
Yeah.
in the Big 12. But yeah, Texas versus TCU in the Big 12 championship. Texas wins it.
Okay.
All right, what's going on, guys? Sorry, we had a technical difficulty there. So we just finished the Big 12. Moving to SEC now. You can go ahead since you're the SEC guy and talk about them.
Okay, so my sleeper team in the SEC, I have South Carolina. Now, again, their record might not reflect this. They've got a really tough schedule, but I think Spencer Rattler started to figure it out there. An honorable mention sleeper for me is Texas A&M. They've got a lot of talent. I don't know if they really classify as a sleeper because they're a top 5 and favorites to win the conference, but they're going to make a bowl game this year. And then my disappointment is Alabama. And it's not because they're going to win 4 games. I think Alabama's going to be fine. It's just when you're Alabama and you don't make the conference title game, you're disappointing. But with that being said, Georgia versus LSU, and I have Georgia winning.
Okay. My sleeper team, in my opinion, I know you said they're not really considered a sleeper, maybe, but it is A&M for me. I have them bouncing back this year, going 8-4. I think they made a good few additions. My real sleeper team, even though I only have them going 6-6, though, is Arkansas. I'm interested to see what they can do. KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders. And then my disappointment, it's hard to pick one. So I'll ask you this question, and that's how I'll choose my disappointment team. Who, in your opinion, has higher expectations, Florida or Kentucky?
Kentucky.
I agree with getting Devin Leary, and I have them only going 5-7, and only winning 1 SEC game. So they are going to be my disappointment team in the SEC championship. I have Georgia versus Alabama, and I have Georgia winning.
Okay. So I guess next we can move to
Big 10, Pac-12, whichever one you want to do.
I think we're both going to be a lot different on Big 10 and Pac-12.
Yeah.
So Big 10, my sleeper, we might have the same sleeper as Maryland. They bring a lot of talent back. Talia Tagovailoa's back. Mike Locksley, the head coach, is really high on his team this year. Don't be surprised if they knock off one of the big boys in the Big 10 this year. My disappointment is Iowa. I don't see their offense improving. And if their offense doesn't improve, they're just not going to be a very good team. And for my Big 10 title game, I did end up pulling the trigger. I have Penn State winning the Big 10 title over Wisconsin.
Okay. All right. We had another technical difficulty. So might cut that out. I'm not really sure. I know that you got through your Big 10 predictions. I don't know how far you heard into mine before you cut out. But I'll just repeat real quick and then
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I have Wisconsin and Michigan in the Big 10 title game. I have Michigan winning it. Sleeper team, Indiana. Don't really know why. And disappointment team. I didn't pick one of those actually. Give me. Oh man. That's tough. Purdue, maybe. I feel like they might have some high expectations.
Yeah.
So we'll go Purdue. I only have them going 7-5. And that moves us to the Pac-12. You want to go first here, man, or what?
I'll go first. My sleeper, maybe not a sleeper, not a huge sleeper. Oregon State. People are talking about them, but maybe not to win the conference. But I think Oregon State's a good team. And this year, it's a pretty big disappointment. I've got Southern Cal as my disappointing team. And in the Pac-12 title game, I have Oregon versus Washington, and I have Oregon winning the Pac-12.
Okay. My surprise team is. Oh man, this is it's so tough because I have the Pac-12 so lopsided for me, honestly. I guess Washington. I've been going 11, so I mean,
Yeah,
I guess that is a surprise. Disappointment, Colorado. I feel like the expectations are pretty high because of Dion. I only
they're
have
not making a bowl game.
so. I have Southern Cal beating Washington in the Pac-12 title game though.
Okay.
All right, sorry for the continuous technical difficulties. We're gonna run through the playoffs super quick here. Jacob, go ahead.
Okay. So at 1, I have Georgia. At 2, I have Penn State. At 3, I have Texas. At 4, I have Oregon. It's bold, but
Okay.
it's fine.
Um, with how my played out, I have Georgia at 1. I have Alabama at 2. I know I didn't really get into that, but I have Alabama going undefeated in the regular season and then losing in the SEC championship. At 3, I have Michigan, and at 4, I have Southern Cal. I have Southern Cal upsetting Georgia in the 4-versus-1
Okay.
game, and I have Alabama beating Michigan in the 2-versus-3 game, and I have Caleb Williams and the Trojans winning the national championship.
That's wild. Okay.
And Jacob, what do you have happening in the playoffs?
So I have Georgia beating. What do I have happening in place? I have Georgia first round. I have Texas beating Penn State, Georgia winning.
Okay, so you have Texas beating Penn State, Georgia beating Oregon, and then Georgia beating
Texas.
Texas in the national championship. Okay, because you cut out just a little bit there, so just wanted to reiterate that. All right, awesome. So, sorry for all the technical difficulties. Uh, this is the first episode of the No Name College Football Podcast. So, we'll see y'all next week or next episode, I guess. Appreciate y'all watching. Appreciate the support. Peace.